Hello, I'm Tashawn Jones. This is Legacy Liner. Welcome aboard. So it's Friday. That means it's time to talk about one of the passengers or crew on board the Titanic. And today we're going to talk about the man, the myth, the legend, Jay Dawson. So let's get into it. So Jay Dawson's first name was actually Joseph. He was born in Dublin, Ireland on September the 1st, 1892, which would have made him 23 years old during the sinking, which is roughly the same age that the character Jack would have been in the movie. Joseph Dawson was described as being 5'7", 144 pounds. He had brown hair, gray eyes, a fresh complexion, and a scar on his left brow. You may notice that in a lot of his pictures, he's not smiling. That's because, according to his dental records, he had some issues going on. He had five teeth removed. So that might explain why you don't see him grinning very hard in many of his pictures. He was the son of Patrick and Catherine Dawson, and according to a 1901 census, he lived in a house with his parents and his sister that only had two rooms. So he did come from a poor background. Now, not a whole lot is known about his childhood, but according to the records, all of the paperwork that he ever had to sign in his adult life, he used his own signature and he did sign his name. So that does suggest that he was literate and had some level of formal education. Remember, this was in the early 1900s, so not everyone had the opportunities to learn to read and write the way that we do today. He joined the British Army in July of 1908. And I guess he enjoyed it for a few years, but in July of 1911, he decided to just do the reserves. That same month, he ended up moving to Southampton and got a job on board the Adriatic as a trimmer. So, on ocean liners at this time, you had what was known as firemen. These men were responsible for shoveling coal into the boilers 24/7 all around. Now, they had shifts, obviously, but the fireman was not supposed to leave that spot. So, in order for his coal to be replenished, you had what was known as trimmers. These men were responsible for bringing the coal from the ship's bunkers over to the firemen so that they can continually put it into the boilers. Now, even though I said that this was one of the lowest jobs that you could have had, it doesn't mean that it didn't require any type of skills or abilities. Because what these trimmers would have to do is shovel literally tons of coal that's stored in the ship. And if they took too much from one side and not enough from the other, it could cause the ship to keel over to one side. So as they're bringing the coal to the firemen, they are in a sense trimming the ship and making sure that she's stable and that they're dispersing the coal evenly. So it was a job that required a bit of skill. Now, the sad thing about the Black Gang, they were referred to that because they were always covered in coal dust and they were always dirty. They kept them isolated from everybody else on the ship. And Titanic is well known for isolating people. The first class up here, the third class down there, the crew. But the trimmers, the firemen, the Black Gang were very much isolated from the rest of the ship. Their quarters were at the very bow of the ship. And in order to go to work, they would just go down the spiral staircase down into the bowels of the ship and do a 4-hour shift before returning up to go to their bunkers, eat, go to sleep, and then repeat the whole process all over again. So in fall of 1911, Joseph was assigned to the Majestic. Now, as you may or may not know, in April of 1912, the coal strike caused a lot of ships to have to cancel some of their crossings. The Majestic was one of them. They took the coal from her and used that to put on board the Titanic. So on April the 6th, Joseph Dawson signed on as a trimmer for the Titanic. When he signed on, he listed his address as the home of Mrs. Priest. She was the mother of Joseph Arthur Priest. So it is speculated that maybe he was romantically involved with one of Joseph Arthur Priest's sisters. And that's why come he was putting that address as one of his residents. Now, being that he was a trimmer, his story as far as what he did on the ship is like what I said earlier. He really wouldn't have been wandering around the passenger areas. It just would have been working, sleeping, staying isolated from the rest of the passengers and crew for the most part. On the night that the Titanic hit the iceberg, it hit whenever he was off duty. When he found out that the ship was sinking, he grabbed his coat and went up on deck to see what happened. Now, I didn't find much evidence on what he did during the sinking, but it is known that he, like so many others, froze to death that night. His body was found, it was number 227, and he was put to rest on May the 8th in the Fairview Cemetery. Now, he was laid to rest May the 8th, 1912. Let's fast forward to late 1997, all through 98. The movie Titanic just came out, and the world's fascination and obsession with the Titanic was reignited. Everybody wanted to go to museums, they wanted to check out the books, they wanted to talk to people that had connections to the Titanic. And one of the things that people did was they wanted to visit Fairview Lawn Cemetery. And you can just imagine the public's excitement whenever they saw that there was a grave for Jay Dawson. It was said that girls would leave their ticket stubs on his grave. They would put flowers, teddy bears, love letters. I mean, they just flooded his grave with all of these gifts and mementos because they thought it was Jack Dawson. And to me, I just find it kind of sad that this guy got more attention from the women in death than he probably ever did in life. And just to clarify, James Cameron did not do that on purpose. I mean, Dawson is a very common last name, and Jack is a very common first name. So it was just a coincidence that he named his character Jack Dawson, and there was this guy in the cemetery whose grave was marked J. Dawson. Now, me being a person that loved the Titanic as a real ship, but also being a person that loved the movie, I think on one hand, it is kind of neat and cute that these girls are leaving these little mementos to him, and it's still keeping the public interested to an extent in the Titanic. This was still a real person, and I think it's important that his story gets told and he doesn't become some symbol of a fictional, almost methodical character. So now you know there was a man named Joseph Dawson, and that he saved me. So now you know there was a man named Joseph Dawson, and that he was a trimmer, not Leonardo DiCaprio. And that's my video on Joseph Dawson. Come back next week when we would do some first class passengers. I believe the Strausses. I picked the Strausses for next week's. So if you want to see a video about the elderly couple from the Titanic, come back next week. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Y'all have a good one.